started, we're holding on 12b, Yud Beis, Amid Beis. We're holding where the skinny lines. Give me 1 second. Let me go find it. Yeah, we're holding 1, 2, 3, right 3 lines before it gets wide. Tanu Rabbanan. So the Gemara had just said that Amra Papa Arba Zaman Sudala Kolhi. That on the 4th hour of the day, that's when everybody goes to eat. So we're not worried about it. Everybody's going to eat their chametz in the 4th hour, and everybody's going to remember going forward to get rid of the chametz. And that's where we're up to. Tanu Rabbanan. The Rabbanan said, Shari Shaina Machal Ludin. The first hour of the day is the time for the meal of the Ludin. Who were the Ludin? The Ludin, believe it or not, were cannibals. So they were a well-known tribe of cannibals, and they were known to be gluttonous. So the moment they got up in the morning, the first thing they did was go eat. Shania Machalistim. The second hour of the day is the meal time for the thieves, for the Ganovim, for the Listim, for the Ganovim, because they all work at night, the Ganovim, we know. The thieves work at night, so they sneak into people's houses at night. So by the end of the night, they're tired, so they take a nap, and then they get up in the second hour and they have their meal. Shlishis Michael Yarshin. The third hour is the time for the meal of those who are Irish, who inherit the wealth from their parents and their grandparents. Since they don't really have to go ahead and work, by the third hour, they're already up. They did their exercise, they stretched, they're ready to have their meal. Revius Malchul Po'alim. The 4th hour is actually the meal for the Po'alim. That's the laborers, the guys who actually work for a living. Okay, and the reason for this is from many Gemaras in Masechtas Brachos, because they started working at daybreak, because there was no electricity. Since there was no electricity, obviously the day was much shorter than the day we have today. It literally went from daybreak, that's when they started working, until just about nightfall, of which they had to stop beforehand to daven mincha, and right after that, the way we do it at BJC, essentially. So what the Gemara there says, for example, is if the time for Kriya Shema arrive, can a laborer who's on a tree, does he have to come down from the tree, or could he say Kriya Shema in the tree? What happens about Shemona Esrei? He has to daven Shemona Esrei, but he's not allowed to steal his time from his employer who's paying him. Does he come out? Does he stay on the tree and say Shemona Esrei, or does he come down and say Shemona Esrei? All these things. But the point was that since they were working from the time of daybreak, Revi'is Machal Po'alim, the 4th hour of the day was when they took a break and they went ahead and ate. Chamishis Machal Tamidei Chachamim. The 5th hour was the time for the meal of the Talmidei Chachamim, and Shishis Machal Kol Adam. And the 6th hour was the time to eating for all people. So upon that, Amar Papa, Revi'is Zaman Sudala Kol. The 4th hour, isn't the 4th hour the meal time for everybody? So Zaktima, you're right. Ela Eipach switched the order around. Revi'is Machal Kol Adam. The 4th hour of the day is when everybody eats. So if the day starts at 6, the people eat by 10 o'clock. Chamishis Machal Po'alim, the 5th hour is the time for the workers to eat. Shishis Machal Tamidei Chachamim. The 6th hour is the time for the eating of Tamidei Chachamim. Umikam ve'elech. And anybody who eats from this time on, kizorik eben lechemes. It's like throwing a stone into a bag, meaning that it's no good for you. It's like you think it's good for you because you feel full, but in fact, it's not good for you nutritiously. Amar Abaya, this that we say is like throwing a stone into a bag. Lo yamrin ela deloy toim midi b'tzafra. That's only if you didn't eat anything in the morning. So this is the first, you're breaking your fast, you break fast, you're breaking your fast. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Yitzhak.
Good morning. Good morning. And you're breaking your fast. If this is how you're breaking your fast, you're first breaking your fast in the afternoon after the 6th hour. It's not good for you, and it's like throwing a stone into a bag. By stuffing food into your stomach that late in the day, and that's when you get started. It's no good for you. I will tell you, me safra. But if one did eat something in the morning, one had breakfast in the morning, less labor, then it's not a problem that you start your first full-fledged meal after the 6th hour. Okay, we just went on a little tangent. Back to our Gemara. Amar Rav Ashi, kimachloikis be'edus kach machloikis bechometz. Just like the dispute that we had in witnesses regarding whether the discrepancy between witnesses could be 1 hour, a 1 hour error, or a 2 hour error, or a 2 hour error and a 3 hour error, like we discussed yesterday. So too is the dispute by chametz, whether you can only eat on Erev Pesach up to the 4th hour and no further, or you could even eat in the 5th hour and no further. The machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir in both cases. Something about Pshita. That's what we've been just doing for the last half and a half, going through it. That back and forth that we just did over the last half and a half, that is exactly the way it is, and we're not dealing with the machlokes tanoi, meaning you shouldn't think that there are two different versions of the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. That in fact, there's one version that says that people make errors of 2 hours and 3 hours, or 1 hour and 2 hours, and what do you call it? And the truth of the matter is that's how it applies, and that's how it applies to the situation of chametz, of eating chametz on Erev Pesach. No, the answer is what's going on by witnesses is witnesses. Because we said witnesses are conscientious, so therefore we allow for a bigger spread. We allow for a bigger spread for a possible error. Because they are conscientious, they're doing their best. It could be. That's the one situation. Regarding chametz, since everybody is involved with chametz, and everybody's got to stop eating chametz at the same hour, and not everybody is conscientious, we're more strict and we hold back. That even though, biblically speaking, you can eat chametz until the 7th hour when we do the Karban Pesach. Bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I want you to roll back no further than the 4th hour, and Rav Meir says no further than the 5th hour. Once again, back to our cases of the witnesses. We allow for certain amount of discrepancies with regard to the hours of the day, like we discussed yesterday. Some people make a 2 hour mistake, according to Rav Meir, 3 hour, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a 3 hour mistake, or according to Abayi's version, a 1 hour, a 2 hour. But if one witness says that the alleged crime took place before the Nehanei Tzachama, before sunrise, and the other witness says that it occurred after sunrise, Edusam Betela. Their testimony is no. Pshita is something more, of course. Because clearly there's a difference between dark and night. The darkness and daylight, obviously there's a difference. One witness says it occurred before sunrise. One says that it happened during sunrise. Their testimony is no. That's also obvious. Obviously, again, in the morning, when it's dark. When sunrise comes, it starts lighting up. What's the question? It's completely two different times. They should have known that on their own. That's not a discrepancy that I can just simply push off to the side. Something Gemara Mao the same, but the reason for that I think this is the situation, Mao the same, because I might have said, really both of them are really saying the same thing, just using different words. And this is what the one is saying. And now we are on today's daf, Yud Gimel Amid Aleph, 13a, B'sai Chanei Tzachama. One was saying that it happened during the sunrise. B'gilusa Havikoi, he was standing in the glow before sunrise. If you ever get up early enough, you know that even before sunrise actually happens, the horizon begins to glow. The horizon begins to light up, begins to lighten. And it was merely the sun rays that he saw. In other words, it had been dark 5 minutes earlier, and now it's starting to lighten up. And he starts seeing like the rays of the sun beginning to rise over the horizon, which is not yet the time for sunrise. So when he said that I saw sunrise, he really meant before sunrise. So they're really both witnesses are saying the same thing, that the alleged crime happened really before sunrise. It's just that he's describing it the way he saw it. Kamash Malon says Rav Shimi Barashi that nobody makes such a mistake. And the reason why we say nobody makes such a mistake, because it's, again, a conversation I had with Jeff yesterday after this year about time. In a world without clocks, without watches, and in a world yet that was Jewish, so that time was important, meaning when is Zaman Kriyishma? Kriyishma Shal Arvis, the Shema that you have to say at night versus the Shema that you have to say in the morning. The 2 times that you say Shema, so you have to know when night ended. So that's the end of the Shema of the night. And now you're up to the time of the Shema of the morning, which means everybody was an expert. In first grade, everybody learned when does night end, when does the night's Netzach Hama begin. That was one of those things. And the same thing at night. Say it's a the whole thing, everybody knew what does it mean that the sun sets and when does nighttime begin, because so many halachas were based on these differences of night and day and when do they apply. So everybody was an expert. So to say that somebody's going to use the wrong words and say it's the Netzach Hama, it's sunrise, when merely the horizon has started to light up, people don't make that mistake. So therefore, this would be a discrepancy between witnesses that we would have to say we have to make their testimony null and void. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav. Back to us. So once again, Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says that we have to stop eating chametz after the hour, Rameh chametz after the 5th hour, and Rabbi Gamliel says you stop eating regular chametz after the 4th hour. The 5th hour, you're allowed to have benefit from regular chametz, and if you have teruma, if there is teruma, holy chametz, the chametz that belongs to the kohen, or kaidish teruma, that you're allowed to eat even in the 5th hour. But everybody agrees by the 6th hour you have to stop 1 hour before the biblical isser, before it's forbidden biblically gets into place. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav, halacha to Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is exactly like Rabbi Yehuda, like we do. We suspend eating chametz after the 4th hour. It's not allowed to be eaten, but it's not yet to be destroyed. The destroying takes place in the 6th hour. Amalei Rav Nachman v'nei mamar halacha k'Rav Meir. But let's say that the halacha is like Rav Meir, that the chametz could be eaten the entire 5th Avenue, fifth hour. Excuse me. See, I'm back in New York. The stam long tana kabose, because the Tana learns it anonymously, and we have a rule: stam Mishnah k'Rav Meir. A unauthored Mishnah means that is Rav Meir, that it paskin like Rav Meir. That it's not, because we learned kol shol shemut le'echol, and this is interesting. As long as it's permitted to eat chametz machal, you're allowed to eat. This applies that not what it's called, that when it's not permitted for a person to eat chametz, he's not allowed to feed it to his animals, according to Rav Meir, which would therefore mean that since a person, it would seem to hold like Rav Meir, that you can go through the 5th hour. Zakti Gemara, no. We love stamahu. This Mishnah is not stam. Mishum kashid mutter. The word mutter, it's permitted. Kol shel shemutter le'akol. All hours that it's still mutter to eat, because there's another shita. Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel said that you're allowed to eat the chametz, all chametz, up including the 4th hour. In the 5th hour, the kohen is allowed to eat the trumadika chametz. If that's the case, that means you still have a heter, a permission to eat chametz during the 5th hour. It therefore looks like the halacha actually is like Rabbi Gamliel. Dr. Gemara b'nei Amar halacha ki Rabbi Gamliel. The habile machriya, because it sure looks like he's the balancing. He's the scale, the tipping point on the balance between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. Rabbi Yehuda said you can't eat past the 4th. And you could have Anah in the fifth, and then by the sixth. So Meir says you can eat everything through the fifth. Rabbi Gamliel is in between. He says you can only eat chulin through the fourth, like Rabbi Yehuda. You can eat truma in the fifth, and you can't eat, and you have to start burning and get rid of the chametz in the sixth. So it looks like Rabbi Gamliel is like right in between. He's taking the mid position between them. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel is not arguing. He's trying to say this is the halacha. We're going to take a bit of both sides of the Rabbi Gamliel is not simply acting as a balance to try to bring a compromise between the two shitas. Elo tam de nafshikam, he's stating his own idea. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel is saying, no, chulin is chulin. It has one rule. Truma has another rule, as we're going to say. Truma has another rule. And in the 6th hour, we burned 11 bread. We burned the chametz. Okay, so he's a third shita. Therefore, Rabbi Gamliel is only a yochid, a individual. He has one shita. Rabbi Meir is a yochid. He has one shita. Rabbi Yehuda has a yochid. He has one shita. Since they're all yechid and they're all individuals, nobody has more power than the other to say that the halacha is like him. Therefore, we take the most conservative approach because we're dealing with chametz and Pesach, which is such a terrible lav, or something that's so terribly forbidden on Pesach, and we're going to be extraordinarily careful. And we're not going to eat chametz on Erev Pesach later than the 4th hour of the day. Be by and the Gemara says there's another way you can look at this. Rav de Omar ki Tana. Rav is saying like this other Tana. That was Amar Nachman Amar Rav halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. So this is the Tana. This year's problem. When the 14th Erev Pesach falls out on a Shabbos, I believe that this year coming up, this is what we're dealing with. We are dealing with Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbos. Therefore, Mavirin es hakol milifnei Shabbos. We get rid of everything before Shabbos. We dispose of everything before Shabbos. We do beer chametz. We burn the chametz on Erev Shabbos on Yud Gimel on the 13th. We sarfen cherumais temeyais teluyais v'tahiris, and we burn chametz of teruma that are tamei, which means they're completely useless. Teluyais, meaning they're suspended. That means we don't know whether they're tahor or tamei. We had truma here, and right next to it we found a creepy crawly lizard, which is a tamadika, what he called dead, laying right next to it, which is one of the shirotzim, the 8 shirotzim that are mitama at the highest level, as we're about to learn a little in starting tomorrow. So this sheretz, this lizard, is dead. It's lying right next to the truma, and we do not know if it touched the truma or not. So maybe the truma is still tar and the kohen is allowed to eat it, or maybe the truma is now tamei and the kohen is not allowed to eat it. So I don't know where it stands. In Yiddish, it's nishtahi, nishtaher. It's neither here nor there. Okay? So, srafat truma slave tiluyos utahiris, and of course, teruma that is perfectly tar that the kohen is allowed to eat. We go ahead and we burn all of these. It seems to be saying, and we burn all of these terumas together. Umishayin minat tahiris mazon shtei sudas, and we leave over from the tar dicker food enough for 2 meals, meaning that Shabbos normally has 3 meals. On Erev Pesach, we do not eat shalosh sudot. We do not eat the 3rd meal. We eat 1 meal at night. Then in the morning, we daven very, very early, like 6:37 in the morning. We rush home. We have a meal with 2 small little bilkies, 2 small chalas. We eat up those chalas. We bench, and then we flush down all the crumbs and everything else right down the toilet. So that's what we said. We leave over enough chametz for significant food for 2 meals. And it has to be chalas. It cannot be matzah, because Erev Pesach, we do not eat matzah according to everyone. My family, we actually don't eat matzahs from after Purim, 30 days before. Other people don't eat matzah from Rosh Chodesh 2 weeks before, and some people don't eat matzah from Shabbos HaGadol the week before.
What's about
But
Tanis
certainly
B'chorim?
Erev Pesach. What? And
What?
so Tanis B'chorim is essentially wiped off the table because we don't deal with
Shabbos.
it. We do it on Friday. You do it because it's Shabbos. I believe that it's done on Friday, the Tanis B'chorim, and everybody tries to get in a siyum, so you're off of it. Because the truth is, you're not allowed to go into Shabbos fasting, except since we're talking about exceptional years. This year, there's going to be a difference. In another month or so, we're going to be in the month of Teves. In Teves, there's something called Asara B'Teves, the 10th of Teves, which had to do with essentially the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash when they started coming in and surrounding the city over there. In the Navi, it says regarding Asara B'Teves, the 10th of Teves, it says Be'etzem Hayoim Hazeh, in this specific day. So the halacha is, if Asara B'Teves would fall out on Shabbos, we would have to fast on Asara B'Teves on Shabbos, because it says Be'etzem, in this day. The entire Jewish calendar is worked out, and it has stood the test of time for over 2,000 years, that Asara B'Teves should never fall out on Shabbos. Because if it fell out on Shabbos, we would have to fast. Tisha B'Av, if it falls out on Shabbos, we push off to Sunday. As Yom Kippur, of course, not, because Yom Kippur itself is Shabbos Shabbosai. This Shabbos, the Sabbath of all Sabbaths. So it has a different, and it's biblical. Asara B'Teves, which obviously did not happen at the time of the 5 books of Moses. It happened much later. It happened almost 800 years later. Because the Navi says the words, Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, the prophet said, specifically on this day, were to fall out on Shabbos, we would fast on Shabbos. So this year is one of those rare times that Asara B'Teves falls out on a Friday. But because it's Asara B'Teves, we fast all the way. We do not break the fast. Going into Shabbos, we daven Mincha, we daven Kabbalah Shabbos, and we break the fast with the Kiddush of Shabbos. With the Kiddush of Shabbos. This is the one exception. It happens extraordinarily rare that Asara B'Teves even falls out on a Friday. This is one of the years. When, I'll tell you exactly, when Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, then Asara B'Teves falls out on Friday. That's just the way it works out. So that's the one difference. So let's just go back over here again. When the 14th falls on the Shabbos, we get rid of everything before the Shabbos. The serpent teruma temeis teluyas v'toris, and we burn the truma that's tamei, that is uncertain, and that is tar. Umeshayim and atahiris mozin shnei sudas, and we leave over just enough chametz stick of food for the 2 meals, the Friday night meal and the Shabbos early Shabbos morning meal. Okay, and believe me, Rabbi Gibber is going to be very, very busy with these halachas within 30 days of Pesach, because you have to know exactly what to do. Everything's tied to the minute there. Kedei le'echol ad arba shoyos, enough food to eat for the first 4 hours of the day. Divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda ish bar Toisa. These are the words of Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda ish bar Toisa, which seems to say straight up that we're holding like who? Rabbi Yehuda, that you can only eat up to and including the 4th hour, but no further. Mishum Sham and Mishum Rabbi Yeshua, who said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, Amrullah, Tahiris La Yisrafu. Wait a minute. The Tar Dika Truma should not be burnt. Shema Yimtzu Lehem Meichlim. Maybe we'll find people who can eat from them. Why are you burning? Why are you burning the good Teruma? We all know, we said that the halacha is that you have to watch that truma needs to be watched. There's a pasuk that says as follows. The exact pasuk is like this: "Va'ani hine nesati lechos mishmeres tumrasi." Behold, I have given you to safeguard my terumas. So teruma is not simply allowed to be discarded so easily. So maybe you'll have kohanim who are guests on Shabbos. They'll need a place to eat on Erev Pesach, the Shabbos meal, and you'll be able to give them the chametz stick and truma. Let them eat it. Let them eat it. It shouldn't be destroyed in a fire. So Rabbi Eliezer said to them, Kika big kivar big shubaloi matzo. But they already looked for people to eat chametz, but they couldn't find them because on Erev Shabbos they tried to call around, and there anybody needs a place to stay for Shabbos, anybody needs a place to stay for Pesach. Called Dichvin Yeseriyecho, whoever needs, come in and eat, right? Anybody needs to have a meal for Shabbos, but they couldn't find anybody, so there's no point in holding on to it. So therefore, they burned it late Friday afternoon. Maybe they showed up late. The Friday night they were staying behind the wall of the city, and by Shabbos morning, they're going to walk in to shul early at 7 o'clock in the morning and say, listen, is anybody available to have us for a meal? And they're kahanim. So save it till the morning. Then according to you, even the suspended truma should not be burned. Maybe Eliyahu, our Navi, Elijah the prophet, will finally show up. Mashiach will show up. And here we go. Hine ba, the day will come that Elijah the prophet will come. What do we say? Even though he has tarried, right? Maybe he'll come. I believe that every day he will come. So then if you're going to start worrying about, we got to worry about maybe there's a kohen out there who needs a place to eat, and I got to worry about it over there. Let me take it to the nth degree and say, I got to worry about Elijah the prophet, right? In that case, the uncertain truma, right? I'll wait until Elijah comes, until Eliyahu Hanavi shows up, and he'll tell me whether this truma is still tahar, and if it's tahar, we can eat it still, or it's tamei, we got to burn it. Zok the Gemara on Malay, and this is a famous rule. Kavar mufcha lehem liyisrael. It was muftach to Klal Yisrael. She'ein Eliyahu ba, that Eliyahu will not arrive. Loy be'arvei Shabbosos, v'loy be'arvei Yom Tovim. Eliyahu is not showing up on Erev Shabbos on Friday, or everybody's running around before on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov to go shopping and prepare for Shabbos and Yom Tov, and your wife is telling you, run to your thing, we don't have challahs, go run and get the challahs, go run to Winn-Dixie, otherwise we're not going to have gefilte fish and all the whole business. Eliyahu is not showing up because then he's going to get in the way of what has to get done. So that means even though we've waited 2,000 years for Eliyahu Hanavi to show up and Mashiach to come, we still tell him, don't show up on Erev Shabbos or on Erev Shabbos or Erev Yom Tov. Amru, they said, Loi zazu misham, they did not move from there, Azar ben Yehuda ish bar Toisa, until they established the law like Rabbi Elazar ben Yehuda of bar Toisa, Shama Mishum Rabbi Yeshua, which seems to say, what are they saying? That what? That you cannot eat until after the fourth, only until the fourth hour, but after the fourth hour you can't eat, and you burn the chametz in the sixth. Zakti Gemara, my love, afilu le'echol. So we see we have proof that we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Zakti Gemara, Amar Papa Mishmei de Rava. No, levar. No, it's only the opinion of a trumas chametz that when Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, even teruma gets burnt on Friday, and you don't have to wait to see if a kohen is going to show up on Shabbos, and therefore feed him. And therefore have to feed the kohen the chametz. Since there's an halacha that you're not allowed to destroy, you have to safeguard the truma. I might have thought that we do not hold like Rabbi Elazar. We have to be machmir. We have to be conservative and say, well, let's wait until literally Erev Pesach on Shabbos to see if a kohen comes and only then destroy it. Kamash Malam, we don't have to go that crazy, and you could do it even on Friday. Va'af Rebbe Sava Lahadu Rav Nachman. The Amar Rabban Barabba Maisaba the Mecha. There was a case with a person shehikbid the sakyom. He left over a sack, actually a saddlebag. Malaya chometz eitzel yoichanan kukah. He deposited a saddlebag full of chometz with Rabbi Yochanan kukah. And then Erev Pesach arrived. The nikvu achbarim by chometz mivatz beitz v'yotzei. And on Erev Pesach came, and the mice bit through the saddlebag, and the chometz started leaking out. So now Volifnei Rebbe. So he came to Rebbe and he asked, "What should I do?" Here's the situation. This guy deposited his chametz for me to watch over here. Now the mice got to it and it's spilling out. But it's Erev Pesach. If I quickly run to the marketplace to try to sell chametz, I'm not going to really get its regular price. The price of chametz has obviously dropped because within a few hours, by hour 5, nobody's eating chametz anymore. So the value of chametz is certainly up. So what should I do here in order to protect this guy's investment? So Rebbe. So Rebbe said, Shorisha and Amalai Hampton. Wait, maybe the guy who deposited this chametz by you might arrive in the first hour, and I'll have it for breakfast. Shania Amalai Hampton. In the second hour, he told him, wait, he might still arrive. Shalishi Amalai Hampton, wait. Ravi Amalai Hampton. This is the hour that everybody eats. Maybe he'll show up now and he'll eat it up his own chametz. Chamishis, in the 5th hour, he said, Amalai Tseu Mochem B'Shuk. Run, go, sell it in the marketplace, so that the guy shouldn't have a complete and utter loss. At least make him some money from his chametz that's leaking out over here, that the mice are getting into, at least sell it. My lav l'nochrim, ki Rabbi Yehuda, which means that he has to run to the marketplace to sell it to the goyim who don't obviously have a mitzvah of chametz, like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the chametz is prohibited after the 4th hour. That's why Rebbe said after the 4th hour, go sell the chametz. Rabbi Yosef, that's not proof. Loi li Yisrael. He can still sell the chametz to Yisrael. Kir Rabbi Meir, like Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir holds that you could eat chametz all the way through the 5th hour. So he waited until the last hour and said, listen, you could at least sell it to somebody who holds like Rabbi Meir, and he'll get, okay, that guy will get a great deal because the price of chametz, the price is rapidly dropping, but at least you will make some money for this guy so he doesn't have a complete loss. Amalei Abaya, Eli Yisrael, if he can sell it to the Jew, Nishkal and Nafshe, then let him sell it to himself. In other words, let Rabbi Yochanan Chakah, instead of running to the marketplace, say, okay, how much is this worth? Right? Let's say it's worth $10. I'll take $10 out of my pocket, I'll put it on the side in an envelope, and I'll use it, and I'll have it for my last meal before I'm not allowed to eat chametz. Brilliant. Something Gemara, and this is a rule, and what it called, and for anybody running a shul and dealing with the money of a shul, this Gemara is extraordinarily important. Mishum chashada, because of suspicion, because if he takes it for himself and puts the $10 on the side, still other people from the outside are going to be very suspicious. The Tanya, Gab Tzedakah, the charity administrator. I'm sorry?
Conflict of interest.
Correct. Even though he's doing everything perfectly.
Doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't make a difference. Gabe Tzedakah, the charity administrator, She'ein lahem aniyim l'chalek, who does not have any aniyim, any paupers to distribute the charity to. Thank God they can't find any paupers, right? Peturin, poichin la'acherim, should exchange the copper coins, for silver coins, meaning the copper coins got devalued, because in the time of the Gemara, there wasn't only the value of what the money represented, the slug itself had intrinsic value. And the copper slugs would deteriorate pretty quickly. So you should do is switch it over to silver coins, which don't depreciate as much. But the ain't partly atzmai, but don't exchange it with yourself. Don't pull out your wallet, take out the silver coins from your wallet, and exchange it for dollar with the copper coins. Gabe tamchi, the administrators of the soup kitchens, she'ein lehem aniyim lechalik, who also, let's say, thank God there's plenty of food, there aren't aniyim to distribute the stuff. Moichin la'achem should sell the surplus food to others. But should not sell it to themselves. So people will not be suspicious that they bought it for an unjustifiably low price. Because it says in the pasuk in Parshas Matas Matzeh, in Matas Matzeh, and you should be clean, innocent in the eyes of Hashem and Israel. Unbelievable. It says you should be, even if you're clean in the eyes of Hashem, that's not good enough. You still need to be clean in the eyes of people. You could do everything correctly. Zog the Chasam Sofer, the holy Chasam Sofer. He says in the story of Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuben, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe, who went to Moses and went to Moshe and said, we want to stay on the Jordan side of the Yarden, of the side, and Moshe lets them have it. What do you mean? You don't want to come into Israel to fight with your brothers to conquer the land? And they said, no, you misunderstand us. Of course we're going to fight. Not only are we going to fight, we're not even going to come back to this side, into the Jordanian Valley. We're not even going to try, to come back to this side until not only do they fight, the 7 nations, but until they settle the land, did not come back perfectly. Said the Chasam Sofer, still, people were suspicious of their motives, so that 800 years later, they went into Golus, they went into the first diaspora 100 years earlier than the rest of the nation. The first people to be taken off their land and spread out into Babylonia and further east was Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe. Why? Because they were nucky in the eyes of God. They were innocent in the eyes of God. They did everything exactly correctly. But 800 years later, people were still suspicious. And it says like this, that a kohen, as we're going to see in other Gemaras, the Kahanim, who collected the money, the shkolim and everything else, were not allowed to have cuffs in their pants because they were suspected of putting coins in their cuffs. Every people, in other words, trust but verify. People are people. That's what the Gemara is saying. And as Charlie well said, it's a conflict of interest. That's why running a shul, and that's why we have to bless Charlie, is no simple business. All it is headaches. Holy headaches, but headaches nonetheless. Amalei Rav Ada bar Masel Rabbi Yosef. Peresh Amartala, you told us, Rebbe, you told us to Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef had gotten sick and he lost his memory, so he couldn't always remember what he taught his Talmidim. Peresh Amartala, you told us explicitly, Seu Mochen Nachrim, go and sell it to Goyim, Kir Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yehuda. So at the end of the day, and that's what we do today, we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, we only have 5-10 minutes. We've got to pick up a little speed. Oh, Rabbi Yosef, come on, all the shmata to Rebbe. On whose view does Rebbe follow? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The Tnan, Hamafkid Peiros Eitzel Chaveiro. If somebody deposits produce by his friend, Afilu Haim Uvdin, even if they become ruined because of ice or depreciation, spoilage, Lo Yiga Bahem, the custodian, the guy who's holding it, shall not touch it. He's not allowed to sell it because he's going to look like he's robbing. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, no, Moichem bebezdin. Go sell it in the presence of the court so that nobody will suspect that you're taking it or selling it at a lower price than what it should get. Why? Because of the rule of returning a lost article. Hashava Saveda, if you are going in the street and you see a lost article, loy salem. You're not allowed to pass by it. You're not allowed to pass by it. The Torah is mechayiv you to be responsible for your other fellow Jew. And you have to pick up the article and you actually have to advertise. You have to send out WhatsApps and whatever and say, hey, I found this. If somebody can tell me, give me a siman, a sign, I will be able to give it to them. Same thing over here. This food is getting spoiled. The spoilage is happening under your watch and the other guy doesn't know it. Essentially, this guy's about to lose his entire investment. Hashav Asaveh, return him a lost article, go sell it so he makes some money. But where should you sell it? In front of Bezdin, which is what Rebbe said before. Go with the chametz, go sell it. Amalei Abaya Lavit Marala, but didn't we learn? Amar Rabbi Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo Ishanu Ella. The Tanakhama taught that you should not sell. You should not sell. Lo Yigabem, you shouldn't touch it. Only Bichtei Chesaron, when the depreciation is normal depreciation. Everything entropes. Everything depreciates automatically from the moment it begins, right? So if that's the case, that you shouldn't touch. But if the depreciation, if the spoilage is much more rapid than the normal depreciation, even according to the Tanakhama, go sell it in the courts. The kol shekain hacha over here by Rebbe's telling Rabbi Yochanan he got to sell the chametz. Because you were looking at a complete and utter loss, because A, the mice were getting into the chametz, and B, the time for not eating chametz was rapidly arriving. We had the case of the Shnei Chalas. If you remember that the carbon taida, which was brought for 4 reasons, because you went over the desert, you went over the sea, you were sick and got healed, and you got freed from jail. So they were brought to come and tell with 40 chalas, with 40 loaves of bread. And they brought it with 40 loaves of bread. They brought it with 40 loaves of bread so that they would have to afterwards make a suda seidah. Okay, so what happened was that 2 of the breads, it said, became puzzle. We didn't know what that meant. So when it became puzzle, something Gemaros, and they would put the 2 chalas on the bench, on the itztaba, on the benches by the Beis Hamikdash. As long as the 2 chalas were laying on the bench, people ate chametz. When they took 1 away, they knew they had to stop. When they took 2 away, they knew it came time to dispose of the chametz. So the Gemara says, Amalei v'chili itzbo v'tzarich. I'm sorry. Tana kamei de Rabbi Yehuda al-gav itzva, on the top of the bench. Amalei v'chili itzbo v'tzarich. Tani al-gav itzbo, rather it means exactly on the top of the bench. In other words, these benches all had coverings on top of them so that if people sat there when it was raining, they didn't get wet. So they actually put it on the covering on top. Such a couple higher. The Harabayis, the Temple Mount, was built as a double row of benches. They were like this and like this around one bench within one set of benches within the next set of benches, almost like stadium benches in the in Rome. Tani Namihoki, Harabai is such a couple haya. The Temple Mount was built with double row of benches. It's Tivonis Hayukanikris. It was called it's Tivonis, which is actually a Greek word. Because there was a row of benches inside another bench. Okay. Pesulas, the loaves of bread were puzzle. Amai pesulas, what made them puzzle? Okay, because there was so many taitas brought, not on Erev Pesach, but on Yud Gimel, the day before Pesach. Niflois Belina, they would become invalid by being left overnight. The taita was eaten by Yom. Sorry about that. Hang on 1 second. The taita was eaten by Yom Ubalayla. In other words, eaten for the day that the taita was brought and the next night. So by the next morning, if you didn't eat it, the breads became lean, became no good, and had to be destroyed. The Tanya, Ein Mevin Toida b'Chag HaMatzis. We did not bring the Toida on the Chag HaMatzis, on Pesach, b'Pnei Chometz Sheba, because of the Chometz, because the bread, the 40 loaves had to be brought along with the sacrifice. So on this, the Gemara adds Pshita. Obviously, it's Pesach. The carbon Toida, the thank you carbon, could be brought after Pesach. So of course not. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, when chametz is still permitted in the morning. But the Tana holds we do not expose offerings to becoming invalid because you can only eat chametz for the first 4 hours of the day. So therefore, and you have 40 loaves of bread, and you can't eat 40 loaves of bread in 4 hours. So therefore, inevitably, some of those loaves are going to become no good. So therefore, everybody moved it up, and everybody brought their tithes on the 13th, which meant that there was so many loaves, and you couldn't find enough people to eat up all those loaves. When the since there was so much, too many were left over overnight, and therefore they became apostle. By the way, this is the reason why on Erev Pesach during the week, not this year when it falls on Shabbos, but during the week after Baruch Sha'amar, we do not say Mizmor L'Soda, the song of the Todah, Mizmor L'Soda. Every day we say Mizmor L'Soda, because on the 14th, on Erev Pesach, we didn't bring the carbon Todah. Since we didn't bring something about Mishum Rabbi Yana had to confuse us a little. Kasher said, really the loaves were good. Ve'ela amai karle pesula is why were they called no good? Shalai nishtach aleim hazevach, because the accompanying animal sacrifice was not slaughtered with them. So this we have to just understand. There are two kinds of holiness: kedushas domim, holiness in its value, and kedushas haguf, something that is physically sanctified. Something that is kedushas domim, that its holiness is in its value, that means it could be redeemed. Meaning that I can go ahead and take money and say, I'm switching them, I'm making the money holy, and I'm now taking this and deconsecrating, and I can use it regularly. Okay? That's what we can do. Something that's the kedushas haguf, physically sanctified, is always holy, can never be redeemed. It's automatically holy. In fact, us Jews are considered kedushas haguf. We are automatically holy. Or as the Beis HaLevi says, when somebody makes an aveira, when somebody does a sin, it means he's being moil in his own hegdish. He's defiling his own sanctity. But the rule is, when it's a physical sanctity, the sanctity never falls off. Yesh me'ila acha me'ila. That means even though you defile, there still could be defiled afterwards and afterwards and afterwards. Or as the Beis HaLevi says, that means if a person goes ahead and he does all 613 Averis, he's over on everything. Not only that, he's shmads. Let's say he becomes a Buddhist. And now he wants to return. He doesn't have to be Megayer. He doesn't have to convert. Why? Because once you're a Jew, you're always a Jew. Once you're holy, you're always holy. Because the physical holiness always stays. So in this case, we're saying the breads, they start off life when you first make them with Kedushas Domin, right? With their holiness, their sanctity is only in their worth. They're redeemable, okay? But once you bring the carbon, once you bring the sacrifice, and sacrifices have four things going on. Shchita, which is the slaughter. Then you have Kabbalah, where you take a klei ashares, a sanctified utensil, and you catch the blood that is spurting out of the animal. Out of the animal. Then you carry halicha, you carry the blood to the mizbeach, to the tabernacle, and then you go ahead and you take the blood and zarika, and you spritz it onto the mizbeach. By spritzing it onto the mizbeach, that fulfills everything. Now the breads, by doing all this in this case, the breads become part of this carbon. They now take on kedushas haguf, physical sanctity, and because once all of this is done, they then could be eaten by the person who brought the carbon. So Zabta Gemara, because the animal sacrifice was not slaughtered for them yet. So therefore, what do you call it? Therefore, the breads had not yet been allowed to be eaten. They couldn't be eaten yet. But in the Nishchitz, said the Gemara says, let the loaves be, so shecht, slaughter the animal, so the loaves could be eaten. So Ovid HaZebach, because the sacrifice got lost. So it's like the Gemara, V'nechi zeberach v'nishchit. So bring another sacrifice. What's the big deal? You lose the first sacrifice, go bring a second sacrifice. Because the person, the donor said, the guy who's bringing the carbon said, this one is my taida, and these are its bread. Kidarabba, the Omer Rabba, Ovar halechem, maybe lechem achi. If you lose the bread, you can bring more bread, because the bread is only ancillary to the main event, which is, of course, the carbon, the sacrifice of the taida. But if you lose this taida, maybe taida acheres. But if you lose the taida, you do not bring another toda animal. You don't bring another thank you animal. My tama lechem gal taida, because the bread is offered is ancillary to the taida. There ain't taida gal lechem, but the taida, the actual sacrifice, is not ancillary to the bread. It itself is the most important thing. And since he said this one is my taida, therefore this one and no other. So let him redeem the breads. Like I said, if before you shecht, before you slaughter the behemoth, the breads only are holy in their worth. Kedushas damim. And Kedushas damim, something that is only monetarily holy, can be redeemed against money. So go redeem them against money, and then the breads, you can perfectly go ahead and eat them. What's the problem? The Gemara says, you're right. You know what? You're right. So that's not the story. When Rabbi Yanai said that they're kosher, body cold, but you can't eat them, this is what's going on. They did the slaughtering. So the shechita happened. And they did the Kabbalah. They accepted, they took the utensil, the holy utensil, and caught the blood. And he started to do the halicha, and he started walking to the Mizbeach so that they could spritz the blood. And along the way, he trips. He trips and the blood spills. So now you can't do the last step, which is the most important step, which is the zrika, the sprinkling of the blood on the tabernacle, right? The nishvat radam, and the blood spills. It's before the entire four pieces of the service were completed. So the loaves, even though they now took on physical holiness, because the shechita took place, the Kabbalah took place, and the halicha took place. 3 out of 4 took place. Nonetheless, it became physically holy so that it can no longer be redeemed, but it did not yet get the last trigger, permitter, to allow it to go ahead and be eaten. Ukiman, and like Kiman, Kirebi, like Rebbe. The Omer Rebbe, Shnei Devarim Atilim, Ma'alim Zeh B'loi Zeh. 2 things that are permitters can elevate a sacrifice, again, one without the other. What are we talking about? The Tanya, Kipsei Atzeres, on Shavuos, they brought 2 lambs with 2 breads. The Shtei Halechem. They brought it with 2 lambs, and the lambs and the breads were waved around, were picked up together and waved around, and then the carbon could be brought, and the breads could be eaten. So because it said, the Tanya, Kipsei Atzeres, do not sanctify the breads except through slaughtering. They do not get a holiness except through slaughtering. What do we mean? Shachtan lishman, if you sacrifice for the sake of the mitzvah, vizarak daman lishma, and you sprinkle, you do zerika, and you sprinkle on the tabernacle for the sake of the mitzvah, kiddush alechem, the bread gets holy, and now you can eat the breads. Shachtan shaloi lishman, if you sacrifice not for the sake of the mitzvah, vizarak daman shaloi lishman, and you sprinkle not for the sake of the mitzvah, like kiddush alechem, they don't get holy, and you can't eat them. Shchitan lishma, but what happens if you sacrifice for the sake of the mitzvah? Vizarak daman shaloi lishman, but you sprinkle not for the sake of the mitzvah. Lechem kodesh ve'ein kodesh. It's holy, but not holy. It's holy in the sense that the breads have now been elevated to kedushas haguf, to physical sanctity, that they can no longer be redeemed. But they're not all the way holy that you can now go ahead and eat them. because you're missing one piece of the puzzle. You did part of the avodah, not for the sake of the mitzvah. Divrei Rebbe. Rabbi Elazar of Shimon Omer, La'olam ein kadosh alechem ad sheyishchik lishma v'yizrek daman lishma. He says, no, they never take on physical sanctity. They never take on kedushas haguf until everything is completed. But at least according to Rebbe, there is a way that what? It can arise to physical sanctity, but cannot go all the way, that it cannot be redeemed, but it cannot go all the way and be allowed to be eaten. So that seems to be that Rabbi Yanai, who says that it's kosher, that the two breads that they left on the bench were kosher, but that you could not eat them, and that's why we call it pasul, is going like the sheet of Rebbe. What are we saying? Where he spilled the dam of the toida in a vessel and then it spilled out. Remember, he shechted it, he sacrificed it, he took a holy vessel, a holy utensil, and he held it under the cow, and the blood squirted into the vessel. So, the Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, Savalo Kavua, and Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, that would be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, says he holds like his father, the Oma, Kol ha'oimid lizroi k'zarik dami. Anything that is standing, that is ready to be thrown, is considered like it was already thrown. It was already spritzed on the tabernacle. Since you did accept the blood in these kalim and you started walking with it towards the tabernacle, it's as if it was ready to be thrown. It's as if it was thrown, meaning that everything that's ancillary has now risen up to Kedushas Haguf, to physical sanctity. The only issue is that because at the end of the day, it's like it was already thrown, but it wasn't actually thrown. At the end of the day, you still can't eat the bread because in order to eat the bread, the blood actually has to be thrown on the Mizbeach. Actually, I've got a completely different case. The loaves were completely kosher. Kol zaman shemenuchais, as long as they were in place, kol adam, kol oichlin, all the people would eat. Nitel achas me'am, when they took one away, toilin, people would stop eating. It was the end of the 4th hour, and they would just feed anything to their animals. Loy oichem loy sarfin. They didn't eat, but they didn't burn. They only gave to the animals. Nitlu shtei, and when they took away both breads, hischilu kulin sarfin. All of them began burning the chametz. And that was the beginning of 6-8. Tanya, we learned, Abishol says, top of Yudalit, and this is where, of course, we're stopping, and I'm sorry we went 15 minutes late. In fact, this is the story. There weren't 2 loaves. There were 2 cows who were plowing on Har HaZeisim, on the Mount of Olives, which is to the east of the holy mountain. As long as the 2 of them were plowing, all the people would eat the chametz. When they took away one of the cow, everybody stopped eating chametz. They didn't eat and they didn't burn it. If they took away the 2 cows, all the people began burning the chametz. Beautiful. Thank you, everybody.